There are so many things I wish I knew before starting an art business. For example, most professional artists make way less art than amateur artists, and it's not their fault. There's a hidden force that prevents them from making art. A hidden force that none of them want to talk about, because if they would, it would make them appear less good than they actually are. So let's talk about it. The first thing I wish I knew on day one is that professional artists have less time to spend on making art than amateur artists. As a professional artist, you will spend 20% of your time on making art and 80% of your time on the business side of things. That means customer support, sales, marketing, packaging, and all of that stuff. And so how much time are we talking about? How much time can an amateur spend on making art vs a professional artist? Let's calculate. So if you're a professional artist, you have 168 hours a week. If you sleep 8 hours a day, you're left with 112 hours. Of those 112 hours, you will spend 30 hours on groceries, food, eating, preparing, showering, watching YouTube, all sorts of stuff. And so you're left with 82 hours that you can work. Now, 80% of the time will be spent on the business side of things, which is roughly 66 hours, meaning you have 16 hours left to make art. 16 hours. Remember that. Now this will come as a surprise, but if you're an amateur artist, you also have 168 hours a week. Now if you sleep 8 hours, you're left with 112. And let's say you have to spend 40 hours working in your regular job, whatever it is, you're left with 72 hours. Of those 72 hours, you also, just like the professional artist, spend 30 hours on food, going to the groceries, showering, YouTube, all of that stuff. And so you are left with 42 hours to spend on making art. 16 hours vs 42 hours. And so what does all of this mean? Well, it means that if you want to become better at drawing or painting, you're better off never quitting your day job. As a matter of fact, I should have probably also stick to my day job a little bit longer. It's been 10 years and I still can't draw a straight line without a ruler. By the way, Annas, please don't show pictures of my old charcoal live nude drawing sessions. There's no reason that people should see that and realize how terrible I actually am. Anyway, it's like Jim Rohn said, time is more valuable than money. You can get more money, but you cannot get more time. And when it comes to becoming good at your craft, the reality is that you will never be able to dedicate more time to your craft than when you're stuck in a soul-crushing, meaningless job. Now, when I'm saying this, I'm obviously talking about the first 10 years of a professional art career. I'm not talking about top-level artists who have all the time in the world. Anyway, what does all of this mean? Well, it means that as a professional artist, you will oftentimes be too afraid to test things out. You will oftentimes be too afraid to be creative. And so that's why you see Damien Hirst making hundreds of animals in formaldehyde, or Jeff Koons after he figures out that balloon dog cell makes hundreds of balloon dogs. There's some kind of risk with being creative, and these people oftentimes don't want to take risks. For those top-level artists, being creative, actually trying something out, is an economical risk that they don't necessarily want to take. And so in many ways you lose a particular type of creativity when you turn professional, and you also gain another type of creativity. It's like Jeff Goins said, the amateur can afford to lose, the expert is afraid to lose. And so what I want you to realize is that a lot of professional artists that I talk to are doubting about their own effort. They oftentimes wonder what would have happened if they would have taken more risk, if they would have made less of the art that they knew that was selling. And so developing a fear of being creative oftentimes leads towards those types of regrets, and simply becoming aware of that as a beginner artist will enable you to structure your plan in such a way that you will avoid those regrets and be proud of everything that you do. And when I'm saying these things, I talk from experience. Let me tell you a little secret I have quite a lot of difficulties admitting. If we look at what I was doing 9 years ago, the art that I was making paintings with up to 30,000 volts of static electricity, something that nobody had ever done. Completely unique, extremely original. And now, 9 years later, still nobody knows how to do that. And I'm still extremely proud of those paintings. But here's the thing. What did I do in the last 4 years that I am as proud of as what I was doing back then? Nothing. What did I do in the last 4 years that comes close from a creativity perspective, an originality perspective, to what I did back then? Nothing. Sure, I made more money in the last 4 years, but did I make better art? I personally don't think so. And here's the thing, I'm much more capable of making better art. I'm much smarter than I was back then. I'm much more advanced in some kind of way than I was 9 years ago. I just don't have the time to lock myself up for 6 months, be busy with some insane creation anymore. And I'm kind of busy in some kind of pseudo rat race, trying to get out to a point where I can outsource things so that I can go back to that original state. And that's kind of a funny thing. I oftentimes regret not appreciating what I had 9 years ago, and I hope you can realize that what you have right now, even though you dream of becoming a full-time artist, is not that bad. It's pretty good. And learning how to appreciate it right now is just going to be an extremely powerful skill for whatever you're going to do in the future. And so the question becomes, how can you make sure that you are 100% ready to make the jump towards full-time artistry? Well, I've created the free artist readiness checklist. It's a tool that covers the art business trajectory, the thing that art schools conveniently left out of their curriculum, and it will show you exactly at what stage of your art career that you're in and give you the perfect timing to go full-time or part-time so that you never have to feel lost or overwhelmed with that decision ever again. I'll share it at the end of the video for free without giving me anything. The second thing I wish I knew on day one is that most artists in the beginning of their professional art career are not going to make a lot of money. Most artists don't spend time on figuring out how they can monetize what they do, and as a result, most artists in the first couple of years barely survive. The last time I checked the auction house track record numbers, 14 artists ran away in that particular year with 57% of the profits. 14 artists, 57% of the profits. This is insane. Now, truth be told, if you're one of those 14 artists in 1 year, you make more money than you will ever need, probably. On top of that, it doesn't take the gallery landscape into account. It doesn't take independent artists' landscapes into account. And so obviously there are way more than 14 artists that are making real amounts of money from their art. But still, it shows you how difficult this whole thing is. If you look at the book publishing thing, in the US, same thing there. Every year in the US, there are about 1 million books published. And of those, only 500 are making more than 100K. And of those, only a handful are making real amounts of money. And so the sad reality is that most of artists, including some of the ones that are famous, are not making a lot of money. They are poor. They didn't figure out how to monetize their art properly. It's like Robert Kiyosaki said, the first 10 years in any profession are the apprenticeship years. And so what does this mean for artists? Well, it means that you cannot jump in too soon. You have to make sure that you put some time in learning the business side of the art. You have to do market research. You have to learn about sales. You have to learn about marketing and branding and social media and all of those things before you jump in. If you jump in too soon, it means that you will not be making enough money. You will be living with your parents. In the worst case scenarios, your relationships will fall apart. Your savings will drop to zero. You might get into depression, substance abuse, alcohol addictions, all sorts of things. According to a study done in 2015, the art industry is the third highest industry when it comes to substance abuse. Well, let me tell you a story. One of the first art fairs that I visited, very young artist, emerging artist, I wanted to do some networking, gathered all the pennies that I had to afford to go there, and after a couple of hours, I was way too afraid to talk to anyone. And the first person that I talked to, Leah, also a fellow artist, emerging artist, we kind of hit it off, and both of us were dreaming about big art galleries, making it big in the art world. And as time went by, I was chasing the likes, exhibitions, art fairs, followers, all of that stuff. And we kept on contacting each other in the DMs. And Leah chose to go a completely different route. She started to make art classes for her neighborhood kids, never leaving her studio, never leaving the small village that she was in. And last year, a magazine article appeared about her work, stating that it was revolutionizing the modern art. And she sent me a message proudly with the magazine article with one line. While you were chasing the world, Dries, I let the world come to me. And so what can we learn from this? Well, not everybody wants to become a content creator. Not everybody wants to become a business guy. Not everybody wants to become an Instagram model. Some people just want to make art, and that's okay. There are a lot of ways towards becoming a full-time artist, and you have to realize that. You have to realize that social media is just a tool, a website is just a tool, online galleries are nothing more than a tool that you can use if you want to become a full-time artist. And you should never let those tools define you as an artist and define your worth. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that you will have to think about diversifying your income and realize that the traditional trajectory of selling original art might not be your trajectory. This is very hard. Selling original art is actually one of the hardest ways to monetize your art practice. And so you will have to become aware of all of the different ways that you can monetize your art and then find the one that works best for you. And some of the ones that you can take a look into, the ones that I wrote down, are the following ones. Think about selling art prints, doing commissioned work, selling merch from your art on your website, collaborating with brands, creating courses, teaching, building social media presence and playing the content creator game with sponsorships and all of that stuff. You could build a membership site, you could do one-on-one consulting. There are so many routes that you can take, and finding the one that resonates with your personality, that is true to you, is probably going to be a good idea. The second solution to the mental health crisis in the art world is simply spending time working on your mental health, a couple of hours a week, whatever mental health means to you. Meditation, working out, doing sports, socializing with people, going to therapy, whatever it means, actually spending time doing that, which is going to be much harder than it sounds, because in the beginning, it's going to be very hard. And so this is a skill in and of itself, making time for yourself, for your mental health. And the third solution is using the artist readiness checklist that will help you discover the steps necessary to build an art career, so that you can partially demystify what it means to make money, meaning that you don't have to feel like a sellout artist every single business move that you make. We'll talk more about it in a minute. The third lesson you should realize before you start an art career is that 9-to-5 job, however much you hate it, will have a social element to it. When it comes to being an artist, you will be alone in your studio 70 hours a week, grinding it out, and there will be nobody. There will be no assistant in the beginning, in the first couple of years of your art career. And so you will have nobody to talk to. This is a particular type of loneliness that even if you're an introvert, you will struggle with. At some points, for me personally, it was so bad that I would go to the supermarket just to hang around people. And so what does it mean to have that type of loneliness as an artist? Well, it means that you will come into your studio, you will have some kind of idea, some flash of genius of a project that you want to work on, and it will sound amazing. And then you start working on it and everything will go wrong. And as everything goes wrong, you will start doubting the project altogether, and you will not really find solutions to those problems. And then you will think about it, and then you will start to doubt yourself and your own integrity as an artist, and then you will start contemplating whether or not you're better off quitting it altogether. And then a couple of days later, a couple of weeks later, you enter the studio again, fully energized, look at the project, and you're ready to go after it again. And this roller coaster of emotions will happen several times a month or several times a year, depending on how long your projects are. And partially because you don't have other people to bounce your ideas off of. You don't have other people to talk with. You don't have other people to comfort you in some kind of way. And now you might think by yourself, well, is that not the experience of humanity, something that everybody else also experiences in life? Well, to some extent, yeah, that's something that everybody experiences, but artists experience it way more. If you take, for example, an accountant, everything about the accountant job is objective. You're either doing things correctly or you're doing things wrongly. With the artist trajectory, that is not true. Everything that you do is subjective. All of your social media posts are subjective. And if there are negative comments coming on them, then they might actually be correct or they might actually not be correct. You don't actually know. And all of the artworks that you make, all of the projects can be criticized because they are subjective. And because they can be criticized, you, in your mind, will in fact criticize them. Now, the thing about these moments of external critique or internal critique or doubting the project or subjective things that are happening is that they will be micro pushes towards micro depression. And so what does that mean for an artist? Well, you will have to find a way to deal with those emotions, to deal with those feelings, to deal with the type of depression that might follow. The reality is that if you look at studies around depression, you will see that around 5% of the population is depressed. But if you look at artists and writers, it's about 15 to 50% of people that are depressed. That is 3 to 10 times more. And then the natural follow-up question becomes, how can we treat depression preemptively, and how can we make sure that solitude doesn't destroy our art career before it even started? Now, the first solution tackles a small cause of depression. If you look at research, you see that prolonged work stress or unemployment rates are actually causes of depression. And so using the readiness artist checklist might very well be a very, very, very small part of that solution, because it's going to enable you to make sure that you make the right choice when you start and don't quit your day job too soon, meaning that you will not be unemployed, meaning that you will not be afraid every time that somebody asks you what you actually do for a living. The second solution is to become part of an art collective, or make sure that your studio is in a building with other studios, some shared studio space. This will result in, well, meeting other artists, interacting with them, learning from them, learning from business practices that they are using, learning particular art techniques, and socializing in general, which will obviously fight loneliness that you would otherwise be experiencing. The third solution is to participate in art group activities. This can be online courses, this can be mentorship programs, this can be live classes, this can be art classes that are related to your art. For example, if you're a drawer or a painter, you can go to live drawing sessions, but this can also just be completely unrelated, like glass blowing sessions or something. I remember going to one paper making workshop where everybody was 20 years older than me, and we spent the whole week together making paper. It was a lot of fun. And the thing about these types of activities is that they also are the best place to network, because you are forced to interact with art professionals for long periods of time. And so I highly recommend this, especially for introverted artists. Now, the most important lesson for beginner artists by far, those who are thinking about starting an art business, is that you will never know how to start one before you actually do. You will never know how to sell art before you start selling art. You can do as much research as you want, but in the end, the most amount of learning that you will do is while you are doing it, in the field, in the trenches. And there's a beautiful quote that sums it up for me by Zig Ziglar. Most people stand on the dock of life, waiting for their ship to come in, when deep down inside, they know it has never left port. And this is very much true for artists. Way too many artists are waiting for Godot. They're waiting for the right moment. They're waiting for some moment of genius where everything will be figured out in their head, and at that moment they will start. But the secret is that you don't have to be great in order to start, but you have to start in order to be great. Another quote from Zig Ziglar, I think. Now, as promised, here's the artist readiness checklist. It's a series of questions where you can answer yes or no. It's going to take you 1 or 2 minutes, and then afterwards, depending on how many yeses you have or no's you have, you will get a particular recommendation that is somewhat tailored to your situation. And if you go to the artist readiness checklist, feel free to mention your score in the comment section. Support each other a little bit as beginning artists. I think that would be a nice thing to do. Now, in the beginning of this video, we mentioned the 80-20 principle, where professional artists are spending 20% of their time on making art and 80% of their time on business. And so a natural question becomes, what do we actually do in that 80% time? What are the steps to develop an art career, to develop an art business? What are you going to do if you're an absolute beginner? You don't have an audience yet, you don't have social media pages. How are you going to build it from scratch? And to answer those questions, I've made a video starting an art business, a guide for introverts without an audience. Link in the description and in the end screen. That said, get the hell out of here.